Greetings. Thank you for joining me. My name is Suzanne Titkemeyer. If you didn't know me, I used to write for a place called Pathos, a column called No Longer Quivering about the Quiverfull and Evangelical movement. If you're here, please do all the YouTubey things like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications. And please don't bully anybody I'm going to talk about here. Not at all. Not even if they have the most awful theology you've ever seen. So today, I wanted to talk about one of the grandmothers of the whole Quiverfull movement. And Quiverfull also has called itself a bunch of other things like the replenishment movement, various other things like that. And even the Duggars that would say they are not Quiverfull, yet they fit all the things of Quiverfull. So they're calling it something else. The IBLP, ATI, they just call it being biblical. So, who exactly, I'm hearing you ask, is Nancy Campbell? Nancy Campbell has been around for one very long time. Her ministry is called aboverubies.org. It is one of the first, she was one of the first. She does Above Rubies magazine. And the entire ministry of hers is geared towards women. It's geared towards women to encourage them to be stay-at-home housewives, to encourage them to smile, to not work, to stretch that dollar all the way. So in some ways, she's no different than Lori Alexander. But where she differs from last week's Lori Alexander is in how she approaches things. She's not nasty or denigrating like Lori tends to be. She's not shaming and blaming like Lori tends to be. And I appreciate that about her. And it's so funny because there's been all kinds of publications through the years in the Quiverfull movement. I remember Gentle Spirit magazine that went out of business when the lady who ran that divorced her husband, took her pile of children, and married somebody else that she met at a conference. Quiverfull has had its share of failures as much as successes. Nancy Campbell is unique in the fact that she has stayed true to her message all this time. There's been no divorces, no nothing. Does that mean there's no pancaking or flip flopping around? No. If you followed her pre 2016 presidential election, you would have seen her do a pretty major shift, her and her husband, Colin Campbell. He runs a ministry with the sounds like a sounds like a men's explicit film for other men called Meat for Men. Think about that one for a minute. Every time I hear that, my brain just goes in straight into the gutter, and I imagine all sorts of things because it sounds like corn. It sounds like gay male corn. So as you can see, I am doing this way instead of doing live streams right now because I'm having some issues with my internet. It's super slow, just like Nancy can be sometimes. Nancy has Titan red flaming hair. It's gorgeous. And this has so utterly subsumed her that some of the stuff she posts on her website and her books are hysterical. Back to what I was mentioning earlier about their politically, before they were endorsing certain candidates, every now and then they were hitting the most Quiverfull like candidates as the ones that they wanted. Like one year, they kept supporting Mike Huckabee, if I remember right. Another year, it was kind of funny because the one that they picked to support was Ben Carson in 2016, and they said all kinds of horrible things. Nancy and her husband said a bunch of horrible things about Donald Trump and his various divorces and abortions and various things. But the second that Trump became the nominee and uttered his grab them by their kitty cat remark, these two dullards started supporting Mr. Trump. Why? Because he was the Republican one. And Colin said that God had given him personal revelation, I believe it was, about how Trump was God's man. To me, that seems like a really dumb reason to pick a candidate. I could be wrong. I wasn't thrilled with either candidate. I wasn't even thrilled the last election with either candidate. So I'll throw that out there. That is one reason why when somebody comes into my Twitter and I can see their profile has certain things, I just hit block without even engaging with them one time, because there has been so much rancor, rhetoric, and so many awful things subsumed into this blind support for one candidate or the other. I just don't even care. I didn't want to fight about it. I'm firmly third party now because of what's going on the last 2 or 3 presidential elections. So back to Nancy. I ranted about politics. There's some things that Nancy says that are good and useful. She talks about gardening. That's actually a pretty good idea. If you have enough land to have to just even plant tomato plants in pots, they taste so much better. I'm a big fan of gardening and growing food. I always have been, always will be. Here I'm having to relearn to garden because gardening in Costa Rica is very different than it is in the States. But I have lovely fruit trees, so we have fresh fruit year round here. So those things I don't have a problem with. It's just Nancy goes to some really strange extremes. And almost everything that she promotes comes straight from the book from the 1930s that I talked about a couple months ago called When Queens Ride By. All about a lady whose husband was a farmer, and the book said that she was causing his farm to fail because she wasn't wearing lipstick or getting dressed up. And she wasn't treating him with proper respect, having meals on the table for him, all of that. So it was just a bunch of old-fashioned gobbledygook from a time way before, like the 1930s. And women like Nancy have made that book sort of a touchstone. Now, it's true there has to be one person who is the point person for every project partnership there is, and that can also go both ways. But not if you listen to Nancy or Lori Alexander. And there are times when you do need to know when to back off and let your husband do his thing, like last Friday when I had a terrible asthma attack in the middle of Price Mart, which is like Costco, and I just had to ditch everything and go sit in the car with my drugs until my pains passed, and let my husband do his thing about getting a television. I knew better. And I also knew that I wasn't so bad that I wasn't going to feel better after a half hour or an hour sitting in a quiet, stable place. So one of the things about Nancy's daily column, and Nancy writes a daily column, and I'm going to tell you something, that is not easy. I got to give her props for that. It's not an easy task. I did it at No Longer Quivering for many years, and it's not easy. It is not easy at all. But if it were something useful, it would be better. One tangent that Nancy has gotten onto that I see no support for biblically, it besides the fact of putting on the dress and smiling and putting on your lipstick like that show, that book, is the idea that you always have to serve dinner at the dining room table with a tablecloth, fancy china, linens, all of that nonsense. She claims that if you do that, you're setting a standard for your household, and it will show your husband you're submissive. Now, how that shows you're submissive, I don't really know, because it does not compute, So I just think that is comical. That is one of her big things. And she's talked about you don't have to have fancy china, that you can have stuff from Goodwill and still do this. And she's right, you can, but the only thing it will do is make yourself feel better about what it is you're doing. Nancy's population of people that she's giving advice to on how to revitalize their marriage and other things are usually women that don't have a lot of education. They're at home 24/7 with the children. They homeschool, they garden, they can. They try to pinch a penny as they can, left and right. They don't buy anything new, buy new and buy used and save the difference. Let me tell you, that doesn't always work. Hence the new piece of furniture buying and the new television the other day. So this entire book is just some of her commenters' comments. So I'm going to read you some passages, and there's no danger of her hitting me with a copyright claim because the ideas that are in here are not, the things in here are not original with her. It says compiled by Nancy Campbell. Nancy, like Lori and many others, tends to merely use other people's words. I mean, Lori Alexander supposedly just wrote a book that was just commenters things. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't had time. I've been busy. This is another one of those. And this one is called How to Encourage Your Husband. And ideas to revitalize your marriage. Well, I read this thing in its entirety, and I cherry-picked through the worst of it for No Longer Quivering. This is one of my few religious books that actually made it in my shipping, was this one, because I was still writing from it some. And it makes me laugh, some of this. Listen to this. A marriage does not work with two Adams. Adam and Eve were not given the same job to do or the same role to serve. Adam was told to work and guard the Garden of Eden, while Eve was made to be his help me. That word I hate because it's so ridiculous and it's one long word in Quiverfull. Adam and Eve were each made to reveal different aspects of our Maker. Together they make a complete whole. God knew how to create harmony with this order. A marriage does not work with two Adams. Well, somebody needs to tell Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon and every other man that identifies as gay that is in a marriage, because I think they would differ with her. God has outlined a harmonious plan for our marriages in His Word, emphasis. It's sad how many women have been taught an opposing doctrine by society, even by their own churches, and often by their own mothers. Knitter, please. There are people that function better in certain things. There are certain things that I do better at that my husband doesn't do that are not gender specific. I do the taxes every year. He does not do that. And that's not one of those gendered tasks. But if you read through this, you would think that. Okay. There's a whole chapter, chapter 4, about dressing like a woman. Recently, I've begun to honor my husband by dressing more femininely and lovely to look upon. I wear skirts. I wear bright colors and take care with my hair and makeup. My husband loves to come home and be greeted by a wife who's made a real effort to please him. He always says he loves me no matter what I look like, but he is encouraged to know I love him enough to spend extra time to delight him. Baloney. Baloney, baloney, baloney. Most men, there's been times I've cut my hair off to my husband, notice anything different? And it's like, you want a new shade of makeup? Is that a new top? So I think this is a bunch of horse hockey. Here's one that says that if your husband doesn't like you wearing makeup, you should scrub all that makeup off. You should not wear any. A bunch of crap about you should have your hair long or else. Long hair is supposedly godly. Come home to the aroma of a delicious dinner cooking. Find all his work clothes and iron them. I don't think it ever dawns on any of these people that some of the things that they are talking about could easily be done by somebody you're paying to come in your household and do them. There's a whole bunch of crap in here about submission, including a bunch of scriptures about it. And about how if you don't submit, you could have horrible things happen, like plagues or your uterus being shut. Like when you, Genesis 20:18, for God fast closed up all the wombs, the households of Abimelech because of Sarah. The implication here is because Sarah was not properly submissive in a way that Nancy approves, that there were no children born in that household. It says here, submission is only one of the 7 secrets of bringing you to fullness of all that God has for you to enjoy as a wife. There are a lot of silly things in here by people I've not heard of before. I have to throw out there that Nancy and her husband are not American. They were raised in and worked in Australia, New Zealand before they came to Tennessee. And Nancy is the editress of Above Ruby's magazine. Always put your husband first in everything. It makes him a confident and successful leader. It's your attitude that counts. Oh, here's a big thing in here written by men. One of the best ways to encourage your husband is to enjoy being his wife. I enjoy having him be the breadwinner while I stay home with his children. I enjoy teaching his children and being the keeper of his home. A constant attitude of faithfulness, respect, and love goes a long way to make him know he's appreciated. There are times when it is appropriate to be appreciative. And there's nothing wrong with telling your spouse, hey, you bless me by doing this. I am a big believer in that. But at the same time, the men in the Quiverfull movement seem to be pretty substandard for the most part. I guess you might call them beta cucks, something like that, using the vernacular of some people. It's interesting because Nancy is very vocal, very out there, very, very prominent, and runs around and runs conferences. Colin, her husband, not so much. He's kind of sits back and lets her do it, which also makes me laugh because of what she teaches. She teaches this super submission that she does not even practice. I often ask myself, what would I do this if we were courting? This little question has gone a long way to build our marriage. She talked about snapping at her husband. I have allowed myself to come to a point where my voice was no longer soothing. Instead, it was always nagging or whining. My smile, I am sorry to admit, wasn't showing much. Proverbs 5:18 says, may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. Well, that is the one that Von Ullman uses a lot too. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about Von because I want to talk about his crazy book that he wrote called What Are You Doing? So tomorrow that's what I'm going to do. I'll do another book review. But this is all stories about submitting to your husband so that you will be extra special submissive. What's really funny about it is there are large portions of it like here, that are patted out by her daughters under their married names in an attempt to fool us into thinking that this is all strangers doing this. Nope, 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 nope. Don't listen to his destructive thoughts. Okay, I want to talk about why this is so dangerous. The pressures of becoming new parents, trying to discern how to live a Christian life that was pleasing to God, financial pressures, and the tension of hurts from our past were too much for me to handle. Stuart and I grew distant in our hearts towards one another. She's talking about listening to destructive thoughts that her own husband was thinking and was sharing with her. Oh my word. She's saying don't listen to those things. If he wants to share with you destructive thoughts, put your mental blinkers on and go, la, la, la. The problem with that is we all need to feel heard. And if your husband does not feel heard, he is going to go elsewhere to say his things. And I don't even mean in a cheating way. One of the things that's really awesome to me about marriage is it gives us a safe framework to sometimes offload those things. There's times where you're really going through something and either your husband or yourself will say, hey, can you tell me if I'm thinking right about this? This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking about doing. And that can be one of the most important things that we do for each other. But according to this, you're just supposed to just bottle that crap up and never share it with your husband and never listen to anything that he has done at all or wants to share with you that's negative. Talks about having positive attitude at all times and all things. There's a difference between having a positive attitude and having mental blinders on so that you're not living in realism, you're living in la la land. And I've seen people in Quiverfull get really mangled emotionally when they do that, when everything is like Ned Flanders. I'm going to use Ned Flanders as an example. Does anybody remember the episode where Ned had to go back to the mental hospital that he'd apparently been raised in as a kid? And they brought in Homer to try and let him be angry because Ned could not embrace his own feelings, his own anger. He'd been spanked to shut that down for many years as a child. So as an adult, he could not express anger or frustration or negative emotions, which are normal. We all have all kinds of negative emotions, and expressing them is more normal than bottling them up. It's healthier, I should say. So Homer was asking him different things. Said, don't you hate this? Don't you hate that? And one of the things I remember specifically is Homer asked him if he hated fluorescent bulbs because they make that weird buzzy noise that kind of gets in your brain. And Ned said, no, they remind me of the sound of angels. He just could not be pushed off anything until finally, and I forgot what Homer did to make him finally lose it, but he did and moved on past that. It's talking about her husband does the yard, the outside chores, but to encourage him, the children and I will make sure the yard is extra neat and clean and straighten the garage before he even has a chance to show him how much we care. Now, what happened to these gender roles? The gender roles that she is pushing say that you let your husband do that, and then turn around and say, no, you need to help him by going behind him and do that. And write a little notes and tuck them here and there and there. If you are married to a man whose sense of self is so incredibly fragile that he has to be propped up with compliments all the time, you don't have a marriage. You have a one-sided worship of him, and he's not even worth it. Make time for your husband. Make time for him, she says. Use your time together to wisely and put aside a ton of time for him that has nothing to do with your children at all or anything. That's not always possible when you're in the thick of motherhood and your kids are littler. That is not even possible. I talk about praying together. Okay, I'm not going to bash that because that can be actually useful, but it's not necessary. Okay, and the next chapter is all about saying encouraging words to him, writing him little notes, tucking them into everywhere. Encourage. Here's an acrostic about the word encourage. Nancy loves acrostics. She has them all the time in her magazine and all over. E, make eye contact. N, nurture your busy husband. C, find the courage to learn new things so that your husband does not feel pressured and have to do everything. Again, they teach extreme gender roles, but then they say, take the burden off your husband by doing more things. Operate in the spirit. Utilize things over and over again so that he doesn't have to work so hard to provide. R, romance him all the time. A, affirm him. Be enthusiastic about his ideas and plans because he knows you're always rooting for him. Trust him to always make wise decisions. Oh my goodness. G, grin. Smile, laugh, and be a fun person when you're around him. E, edit. Edit your thoughts. Keep them positive. Are you being kind, appreciative, encouraging? I have a lot of selfish habits to eliminate. So I'm on a mission to edit myself constantly. I edit out anything that tears down my home and my family. You know, your thoughts are not going to destroy anything. You shouldn't be doing that with your thoughts because I've seen people get into pretty extreme trouble for that one too. And that's one that most Quiverfull churches will teach. They teach you to control your thoughts. Now, sometimes you must. One of the things that I carried out that's been the most useful is not taking offense. What do I mean by that? Somebody might do or say something around you that you don't like. And instead of thinking that person is a scumball because they're saying X, Y, and Z, just don't even take offense. It's just like in one ear and straight out the other. But at the same time, it actually says in the scriptures to be as peaceful as a dove and as wise as a serpent. So that means that you have to operate the old brain here. And it doesn't mean always skipping around, la, 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 la. It means using discernment. You don't flip out on people. You don't take offense at everything. But you kind of like make a note and move on. Move on rather than that. So here we go. This book was published a long, long time ago, and they've been married well over 50 years. And I think as far as I can tell from her website and from the things she does and the different things that she goes on, all the teachings, all the books, all the everything, that Nancy Campbell is very firmly wearing the pants in this family, very firmly, yet she's paying lip service to him wearing the pants. So this entire book and much of her ministry is a crazy mishmash of ideas that sometimes even contradict themselves even while you're reading it, even while you're looking at her website. But like I said, Nancy is one of the oldest cultural enforcers, and she's one of the least offensive, and one that doesn't really attack other women and tear them down. You normally won't see anything from her like that. Now, she has a granddaughter that does. I've seen her granddaughter's hateful writings a number of times now, and I think she's been groomed to take over from Nancy, and if she does, it's going to be you know what show. Anyway, I'm running out of air. I'm running out of steam. Nancy Campbell. I'm going to have to revisit this because I just now started getting into the book again, and I know that I didn't give you complete information about Nancy, except that she loves her tables. She loves her fancy china and tablecloths, and is constantly talking about setting a great table for your husband to show him how much you appreciate him. So everything in Nancy world is to show him how much you appreciate him, to prop him up like he's a man that is so weak that he has to be constantly soft soaped up to be able to do things. Okay, I'm going to go. I don't even have anything to say about that troll today. My poor Magic 8 Ball has nothing to say today. Um, Tomorrow I will be covering the hysterical hot mess that was Von Ullman's book, What Are You Doing? It's a self published, thin little book that was written like it is a play. It's written like a play, and it has the most ridiculous names you've ever heard. Adam Abbott, Adam Adamson, Maiden for the girl. Stuff like that. It's the most ridiculous thing on the planet. And the book has so many weird ideas in it, and they all revolve around the same thing. As soon as a girl gets her period and her boobs, she should be married off in Von Ullman's world. As soon as. Now, he's backed up from that because we've busted him on it a number of times and said, oh, no, 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 no. It only can happen when they get legal age. Well, Von, that's not what you've said in the past. That's not what your book indicates either. He likes to imagine the breasts of young girls. So tune in tomorrow for that one. I can't wait until Telecabla gets her act together and I can do live streams again, because this is a whole lot harder than doing a live stream. I love to interact with people. I value your comments, your questions. I do. So please forgive me for doing this instead until they fix this whole thing. And have a wonderful day. Love you guys.